this is the perversity that I really want to try and get to, that once you can control the money printer, that you can actually insert an idea. You can use the purchasing power stolen through money printing to fund the inculcation of an ideology or even an entire curriculum, and this idea, pseudoscience basically, that justifies the money printing. So it gets in this very vicious cycle of, okay, well, we print money to steal purchasing power, and we also fund a narrative to tell the victims of that theft that it's good for them.
Right.
And therefore we're able to steal more and fund more of the ideological subversion and so on and so forth. And you get deeper and deeper into this game to the point where you're saying history forgets about it, right? It's like we've lost touch with the truth because we've been producing this fake money and funding this fake ideology for so many generations. It reminds me of Plato. He said something like, those who control the past control the present. Those who control the present control the future. So he's basically saying, like, if you control our understanding of history, well, then you control the present, right? Like he also said, those who tell stories rule society. And so this is why the printing of money is so much more than just even the stealing. It's almost like a mind control or a the ultimate social engineering mechanism or narrative control, whatever you want to call this. And you end up debasing not just the purchasing power of the money, but you're debasing our intellectual bandwidth, our attunement to what is true and what is historically accurate in the sphere of economics and elsewhere. And so, like, how the most pernicious question in the world, like, how the fuck do you get out of that vicious cycle?
I don't know. Well, there's one other concept that I think is really at the heart of it. You have said it in so many ways already. And I think it's the one that, you want to talk about language and dishonesty. It's the one that John Maynard Keynes misrepresented. And his misrepresentation became the dogma. Mm-hmm. And it's called Say's Law of Markets. Are you familiar with Say's Law of Markets?
I've heard of Say's Law, yes.
So...
is this supply creates demand, or is it vice versa?
Yes.
Okay.
So Keynes decries this as part of like the confusions of the classical economists, that supply creates its own demand. This is his formulation. So you hear that and it's like, supply creates its own demand. What does that even mean?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense because that's not the concept.
Right.
The concept is far more simple and far more essential. It's that my ability to demand.
Yes.
Demand is not desire. Demand is not want.
Right.
Demand is I have the means to buy that thing.
Yes.
Where do I get the means from?
Right.
I have to supply something to someone else.
Yes.
If it was barter, then my ability to demand what you have means I have to create the thing you want.
Right.
So my demand is enabled or constituted by my ability to supply, my productivity. Demand, the source of demand is productivity.
Yes.
That is essentially Say's Law of Markets. So what does that tell you when you think about that, when you live with that thought? It tells you that, number one, printing money doesn't create anything.
Doesn't do shit. Doesn't do shit.
So
and this is so, by the way, sorry, just so intuitively obvious if you just stop and think about it for a minute. It's like, oh, we're hungry and we need shelter. Like, oh, why don't we just print some slips of paper then?
Yes.
It's like, how did we get tricked into this?
You can burn that for warmth, I guess.
Yeah.
But we see this. So, okay, we're sitting here. It's November. It's November 5th.
Election day.
Election day.
Yeah.
God forbid.
What a day.
But we're coming up on the Christmas season. Even the Wall Street Journal will tout this bullshit lie. Well, consumption is 70% of our economy, and consumers drive the economy. Consumer spending. It's like, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
That is not how things work. Eating pizza doesn't create more pizza.
That's right.
It uses up the pizza.
Yes.
Buying toys off the shelf. I made a video about this, like sort of mocking it for Christmas.
Yeah.
Buying toys off the shelf doesn't create more toys.
Yes.
Demand doesn't create.
Right.
Demand uses things up.
Right.
The way you get more toys is producing
more
toys.
Yeah.
So the underlying, Walter Williams talked about this really, really well, and in how he defines money. It's the best way I've ever heard it described. That what money actually is, real money, the purchasing power, it is a receipt. It is a slip that you get in exchange for contributing to the supply of value in the society.
To productivity, yes.
I go to work,
Yeah.
I create value for somebody else, I get this paper that is a receipt saying you did it, you created value.
Yes.
And it is because I created the value that I get to use it and
Yes.
spend it. If none of us create value and everyone uses, it's like, so much of economics can just boil down to what would it look like if you had 10 people on a desert island?
Yeah.
Imagine that everyone's hungry and nobody works.
Yes. Yeah.
No one's fishing, but we all want fish. Well, or we fish for a while and then everyone stops fishing and just starts eating.
Yes. What happens? Yes. Yeah, no, it's amazing how we've gotten into these lofty heights of abstraction. I would say, again, largely driven by Keynesian pseudoscience. Right? They try to mathematize and put all these fancy formulas around it, but like the base assumptions are just wrong. It doesn't matter what math you put on top of it. And we've, in these lofty heights of abstraction, we have lost sight of the very simple fact that you cannot consume what has not yet been produced, right? Production must precede consumption.
I mean, we hear this so much. Other examples of this, the Say's Law thing being perverted.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's more of a stimulus to give tax credits or incentives or subsidies to poor people because they'll spend all the money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's better for the economy. What does that mean? How is it better for the economy for people to use stuff up quicker?
Yes.
It might be better for them. So if you want to say it's humanitarian to help the poor, that's an argument that's legitimate. Right. To say it's going to accelerate growth if we give more money to people who don't save and have to spend it all right away,
right?
Well, you're just a liar. Then the way we get more, the way Apple brought the price of the iPhone down is by producing better equipment and reducing the size of the chips and making more with less. It's always it's never any more complicated than growth is driven by the process of figuring out how to get more from less.
Yes, how to create greater results with less efforts, which is the definition of the process of economization is that, right?
Yes,
literally
right. To economize.
Yes, that's literally what it is. And just to re-emphasize something you said, that definition of money, right? I go to work and I add to the productive output of the world. Whatever it is, I'm doing favors for other people.
Yeah.
I'm paid in money, right? And then that money is my receipt saying I can go and redeem commensurate favors from other people in the future, right? I have added to the productive output of the species, but I have not yet subtracted from it until I spend my receipt.
Yes.
Now that is a great system, right? Because now each individual can just do whatever they're really good at and enjoy the fruits of what everyone else is really good at. This is the division of labor, specialization. That's what gives us all this lap of modern luxury that we live in. That's all based on money functioning as a savings device.
Yes.
If you print money, you're actually disincentivizing people from holding, right, from contributing to the productive output instead of consuming. You're disincentivizing them from delaying gratification, basically. So you're disincentivizing the process of economization itself. And
they say it explicitly, that you hear these absolutely demonic schemes, especially when we have recession. Ideas like we should be charging negative interest.
Oh my
that
God.
Your money should actually literally burn a hole in your pocket to force people to go out and spend it.
Yeah.
It's like, this is equivalent to what FDR did during the Depression, where seeing prices fall because of bad monetary policy and deflation went around destroying food stocks amid a hungry society, like slaughtering hogs, raising sheep and raising fields and burning them and reducing the supply instead of fixing the monetary system and trying to increase the supply of food for a hungry America.
Yes.
He was like, oh, the prices have gone down. We need to reduce the supply of food.
Yes. Yes.
like,
yes.
Oh my. Have we learned nothing?
And this is what, it is. It's like a self-deception at scale in a way that we get lost in these lofty heights of whatever abstract, typically Keynesian economics that we're lost in. We're out of touch with the simple fact that you got to produce before you consume. And we start to do self-destructive things. And that's just a big problem. And I really don't know the answer to it at all.
I mean, I think you're pointing at another way to think about what money is. It's implicit in everything we've been saying, but especially this idea of like a receipt for contribution.
Mm-hmm.
It's a contract.
Yes,
It's a kind of contract that for an amount of value. It is an exchange of value, and it is a contract saying, I did this, and now I have this contract that allows me to, at a later date, redeem it.
Yeah.
And what is the basis of all contracts? Trust. Money's fundamental intrinsic value, if you will, is nothing more than whether people trust that it is actually any good.
Yes.
And that is the thing. That is when you see these hyperinflations, like whether it's Argentina or Weimar Republic or Venezuela or every place that like far left whack job stuff gets applied to its, the closer you get to communism, the closer you get to the bottom of Dante's Inferno of hell. We get these things like, oh, real communism's never been tried. Yeah. It's like, real capitalism's never been tried. We don't have an anarcho-capitalist society either. But on a spectrum, we've tried getting pretty close.
Yeah.
So as we get close, it looks like this. Okay, so if America is in the closer to anarcho-capitalist free enterprise, but still quite far away from it. We're very fascistic in our society.
Well, as you said earlier, we can never be more than 50% capitalist because we have a central bank. Central banking is Marxist, and money is 1/2 of every transaction.
That's true, right?
So anywhere you have a central bank, you're 50% Marxist out of the gate.
Well, but when the closer you get to, the government picking winners and losers.
Yeah.
The government determining what you are and are not allowed to do. Essentially, even when it's private, well, is it really, do I own my home, really?
Not if you don't pay your property taxes.
Do I own my property when I can't cut down a tree in my own house without getting somebody else's approval? Do I own it?
No. You do not have a loyal title. You have fee simple title. Right? It's like you own it at my leisure, I being the state, basically. Pay your property taxes, do what you're told, and then you can kind of own it.
I think there's like a deeper thing going on, and this is something I've been less in my first decade of adult intellectual discovery, focused on econ and Ron Paul and all this. It was all about these ideas. And I think what I've now started to spend more and more of my concern focused on is that there is a spiritual rot that that is part and parcel with this question of trust.
Yeah.
So when you have more trust, when you have a more, for lack of a better term, virtuous society, you don't need as much bureaucracy. You don't need as much detail in your contracts. You can transact with a handshake. Contracts are costly. That's all transaction costs. That's all dead weight loss on your life. Having to go back and forth and, what if you do this? What if you do that? Let's try to lay out in advance all the ways we might fuck each other. Yeah. Let's not do that. Instead being no, I trust you. You're an upstanding guy. Let's handshake on it. You'll be coming by next week to do this, or I'm going to be coming by next week to do that. When you see there is this feedback loop and the directions cut in both ways, high trust societies have better institutions, do better. More stable monetary systems contribute to a high trust society. Yeah. Weak money, bad money, breaks trust, which then corrupts the institutions, which then corrupts the people go into this downward spiral until you get the Soviet Union, where you have family members ratting on each other because the only currency you've got is survival.
Right.
And trusting someone is just is being stupid.
Yes.
And I think I increasingly feel like the policy levers are not remotely as important as the underlying virtue and values. And this is to kind of come back to being a father, to the family. I think we as individuals and as Americans and as men need to take ownership of our responsibility for our families and for our kids and not turn them over to the state.
Absolutely.
Do not put your kids in a government-run school or a woke private school.
Right.
Decide for yourself that I'm going to make sure that my offspring understand what virtue means, understand the way the world actually works. Because otherwise, it's kind of your fault.
Yes.
It's kind of your fault. You turned them over to the scumbags to educate them. And what do you know? They turn around and they hate you.
Yeah.
Well, why would you turn your kids over to people that hate you?
Yeah.
I won't do it. I never have done it. I'm not doing it. And I think that we abdicate our responsibility and then we wonder, what are we going to do now that everything's broken? It's like, well, let's start by taking responsibility for the things that are within our control.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.